Hello, good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. This evening we have as our guest Mr. Sheshadri Chari from India. Mr. Chari is a member of the National Executive of the BJP party and the convener of the Foreign Policy Cell of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party. He is also the Secretary General of the Forum for Integrated National Security in India and the former editor of the organizer. Hello, good evening and welcome Mr. Chari, and thank you for being on our show. How does India view Sri Lanka now, since January of this year?
Well, Sri Lanka has always been an important country for India. We look at a peaceful, stable Sri Lanka, and as far as Indo-Sri Lanka relationship is concerned, it's not just the geographical proximity. It's also, if you see the history, geography, culture, chemistry between these two countries have seen a number of ups and downs, but overall it's very important for India to have a very peaceful and prosperous Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. So India has always been looking at Sri Lanka as a partner, as a strategic partner, as a partner in culture, as a partner in progress, as a partner in economics, as a partner in the most important aspect of foreign relations, the strategic part of it. Mm-hmm. We are very conscious of the fact that between India and the South Pole there is only one country, and that is Sri Lanka. So we look at Sri Lanka as an important element in India's security and strategic Indian Ocean region.
But we're a small country, and you are a big superpower.
No doubt India is a leading power, no doubt about it. But the strength and importance of a country does not depend on its size. It depends on its history, it depends on its own resurgence, capacity to research, capacity to come out of all the problems that any country can face. Mm-hmm. There have been large countries in geography, in area, but which have failed.
I see. And can we move on to something? SEPA. Can you tell us what is hoped to be achieved through SEPA?
No, it's a small subject. Actually, SEPA is an important economic tool. Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between India and Sri Lanka is being discussed almost for the last 5-6 years now. India, of course, wants to have a greater functional relationship, economic relationship with Sri Lanka, because Sri Lankan market is very important for India. Some of the products in Sri Lanka are very important for us, but at the same time India is a very huge and large market for Sri Lanka to approach. So SEPA will give the kind of approach, it will open up certain possibilities for Sri Lankan businessmen. So we are looking at SEPA as a bilateral arrangement, which is a win-win situation for both India and Sri Lanka. But of course there are some apprehensions as far as SEPA is concerned among a section of the business community in India, in Sri Lanka, and I think India should address all those apprehensions.
Some of our legislators here have said that we may see an unfair influx of Indian workers into Sri Lanka. Is that true? Is it?
I don't think so. But if there are apprehensions, as I told you, they should be addressed. No doubt about it. But don't forget one thing. India is an expanding market. And in this last 1 year of Narendra Modi government, there has been a tremendous turnaround in India. India is the most favorable destination for the whole world. India is attracting much more investment than all the European Union countries put together. The market capability of India is huge. India is huge production center. India is the only country in this part of the world which is a production center and a consumption center both at the same time. So looking at this kind of an image with a projected 10% GDP growth, I doubt if an Indian worker would move to Sri Lanka as a greener pasture.
Let's see.
On the other hand, it is the Indians who should be worried that Sri Lankans may come to India.
Okay.
Just as people from Bangladesh migrate to India for greener pastures. But we are not worried. India has a huge capability and capacity to absorb people, investment and growth orientation. So I don't think it will be a very, very correct way of looking at the after effects of SEPA.
Right.
After all, we had FTA. Did it mean that the floodgates of employments were open in Sri Lanka? No. You did not suffer because of Indian influx in Sri Lanka, number one. Number two, Sri Lanka did not suffer because of excessive intrusion of services into Sri Lanka from India. No, you did not.
We'll take a short break and come back to the hot seat shortly. Welcome back to the hot seat. Mr. Chari, Narendra Modi's manifesto was contained points that he wanted to be achievable rather than aim for the impossible. And in that context, India didn't really go for this permanent seat on the National Security Council, for example. Is that right? He wanted a manifesto which was achievable. So how is that going? How is 1 year later? How is Mr. Modi doing?
A permanent seat in United Nations is not a subject of Indian manifesto or Indian election.
Right.
The Indian voters cannot vote for a permanent seat in UN.
Quite.
That's a different ball game.
Right.
So the manifesto speaks of the promises which the government will carry out for the people of the country.
Right.
But of course, if you look into the whole gamut of India's influence and India's area of engagement the world over, India now in the last 1 year, as it was before also, has emerged as an important pole for all the countries. Major economic countries of the world want to deal with India. So we have carved a niche for ourselves. Especially Modi has undertaken as many as 27 visits to foreign countries. Each of this visit has been pre-planned, well managed, and they have a specific agenda which we have been able to achieve. So this has given a great inroad into the market's potential of those countries. We are energy starved. We are getting energy from CIS countries. We are getting important nuclear material, fissile material from Australia and Canada. We have expanded our market scope with the US, and we are doing excessively good business with China also. Don't forget, India and China are contemporaries, they are partners, and they are also competing with one another. So they compete with one another, at the same time they are partners in progress. So we have been able to work together with China, USA, Japan, Australia, Canada, European Union, Germany, all at the same time. So the next stage of our involvement and engagement is with the CIS countries, which are energy rich, with Russia. We are now signing a big number of deals with them. And we are also going to enter the African market in a big way. Africa is more than 54 countries, and Africa is an important area of engagement for Indian foreign policy and also the economic policy of India. So if you look at this, we are positioning India globally in a manner in which we will be naturally partnering with number of countries and economies at the same time.
Mr. Chari, there has been some sort of rough waters in the relationship between South India and Sri Lanka. There has been protests and so on from time to time. How is that doing? Is it a bit abated now?
I think it's a thing of past now.
Is that because Mr. Modi has been elected with such a good majority?
Yeah, with 282 seats in Parliament.
Yes.
It's no longer a coalition government. It's a 100% BJP government, although we have an NDA, National Democratic Alliance, which has got a number of political parties. But we are not dependent on the BJP. By its own has 282 seats. So the BJP is not dependent on any other political party, especially the parties from the south, which was not the case earlier. Even during the first term of NDA, during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's prime ministership, we were dependent on political parties from the south. The last 10 years of Dr. Manmohan Singh's government was also dependent on certain political parties from the south. But this time, the BJP in Lok Sabha, the lower house, the people's house, is not dependent on political parties. But that apart, we have a very beautiful federal arrangement where the states and the center can have different political parties. So as far as defense, taxation matters and also foreign policy is concerned, they are central subjects. So how India deals with Sri Lanka cannot be the prerogative of the state governments.
Right.
Tomorrow, a state government like Bihar, which has close proximity with Nepal, cannot dictate terms to the center as to how we should be dealing with Nepal.
We'll take another break and rejoin the hot seat shortly. Welcome to the hot seat. We're joined here today by Mr. Sheshadri Chari, the convener of the foreign policy cell of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP party. Thank you again for being with us today. Mr. Chari, in terms of reconciliation in our country and in reconciliation of the communities, what is, in your view, what is the biggest problem we face?
The biggest problem that Colombo probably faces is, there are two problems, I would say. There is a local issue and an international issue. I am not much worried about the international issue. The fact that you have been able to convince the United Nations to a very large extent is well taken. And you have a very good judicial system, as I said earlier. But, you know, the local issue is you have what I would call a trust deficit between the north and east and the south. This north-east versus south divide, the perceived division, is a little bit of uncomfort. So I think Colombo should be able to build bridges on the communities. For example, I mean, there was a time, if you go back to history 30, 40 years back, there were a number of Tamil leaders in Colombo. They were in parliament. Tall leaders whose contribution to the development of Sri Lanka was enormous.
Then you do know what happened to them, don't you, Mr. Chari?
They have been eliminated
by the LTTE.
Yes, that's
one of the lasting effects of the LTTE's mergers activities, really.
Yes.
We have a dearth of Tamil politicians in this country as a result.
Yes, to a very large extent, yes. In probably in their one-upmanship, so number of Tamil leaders. There are reports.
The list is long and arduous.
The most of the Tamil leaders in Sri Lanka were eliminated by LTT.
Correct.
So that's very unfortunate. But now, since the Tamil leaders are gone and the LTT is gone, now is the time for the Sri Lankan communities to come together on this issue. So you have a number of areas where you can build these bridges. The Dhamma Dharma bridge, the Hindu Buddhist bridge, and also the 3-language formula which has been initiated, making Sinhali, Tamil and English compulsory for all Sri Lankans. It's an excellent methodology to bring people together. I remember one of our former presidents, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, during one of his visits to Sri Lanka, when he was told about this scheme, he praised this scheme very much, and he said, I wish this kind of a scheme could be implemented in India.
It's a bit difficult with over 400
of course.
languages.
No, I'm not saying this. Of course, India has about 30 states with more than 300 languages. But these are all issues. Language can divide, but language can bring people together also. So if you are conscious of all these things, we create a number of leaders in every community and give them equal opportunity of power sharing. After all, the entire idea of Tamil Elam and everything was about sharing power. It's about realizing the potential of each and every citizen of Sri Lanka. If the constitution allows it, and if the implementation of the political structure is made in such a manner that every Sri Lankan is able to contribute to the development of this country, what else do you want?
But this power sharing doesn't necessarily mean dividing the country up.
Absolutely. That's why India was always on this side. We always said that we must find a solution to this vexed problem in Sri Lanka within the existing constitution and without going in for partition. And which country other than India you think knows the pain of partition?
I want to ask you about this. How important is personal relationships in the way two countries treat each other?
Yeah, personal relationships have become very important. Gone are the days of ideological interventions. After the end of the Cold War, ideology is no longer a glue between countries. Now, economics also has not been able to be very successful between countries. So, we need some such factors which can bring countries together.
Right.
There could be a number of factors, but personal equation is the most important factor. So I think personal equations do play an important role as far as relationship between two countries are concerned.
And does Mr. Modi, obviously being the chairman of his, the convener of his foreign policy cell, you must know these things firsthand. Does Mr. Modi have a sort of a soft spot for Sri Lanka? Or does he not have enough time to bother about this little country down there?
No, as far as foreign policy issues are concerned, we can never say that nobody has time. We have to find time for all these things. But as far as Mr. Modi is concerned, I think he is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit the South, visit North, visit Jaffna. We would have been very happy if the former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was also a very erudite scholar and an economist, but unfortunately he could not come to Sri Lanka at that time because of probably political compulsions. But Modi was the first Prime Minister to visit Jaffna, and he was the one who has always been in the forefront of suggesting that we should quickly go through some of the important projects in Sri Lanka, especially the railway link, the road systems. Now we are very seriously thinking of creating a viable connectivity between Rameshwaram and Talaimanar, it's just 22 kilometers. If we have a 2-track railway system and a road system between Rameshwaram and Talaimanar, look at the amount of goods and services that can transpire between these two countries, and look at the amount of people-to-people contact that we will be creating. We will be practically recreating history.
Don't you think most of the traffic will be from there to here?
No, not necessarily. Even when this connectivity was available, most of the traffic was from Colombo to Rameshwaram and back. It was not the other way.
Almost finally. How much of this one-sided, shall we call it, de facto bullying goes on diplomatically? Pressure from the bigger brother, as in this case India, saying to Sri Lanka, look, you guys, you got to do this because we ain't too happy with what you're doing.
I don't think, if this is the perception, I don't think it is a very correct perception. India is a soft power. India is not known for bullying.
You're fond of saying that India, rather than a superpower, likes to say that it's a leading nation.
Yeah, India is a leading nation. India is a soft power. India wants to use culture and religion, Buddhism, more or less all these factors as instrument of foreign policy, instrument of engagement with Asia and Southeast Asia.
Are you able to comment on former President Rajapaksa, 9 years and a bit more, president of our country? When he was out of office, he said that Raw had something to do with his losing the polls in January this year. How true, how false?
I don't think it's very true.
No.
No. India is not a country which would deal with other countries, especially a neighbor like Sri Lanka like this.
The hot seat interviews are usually incomplete without this question. I know that you have an abiding interest in Buddhism. So how fares Sri Lanka in achieving the middle path?
Middle path is the most defining way of dealing with any issue, not only in the life of an individual, but also the lives of countries. Like individuals, countries also have problems, circumstances and solutions. So I think, like individuals, the countries also must adhere to middle path. And that is the saving grace for both Sri Lanka and India.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chari, for being on the show. And look forward to having you here again.